The sun was just coming up when Amara put the final signature on the papers. The real estate agent smiled and handed her the keys. "It's all yours now," she said. Amara couldn't believe it. After 15 long years of working for other people, saving every extra dollar, and countless sleepless nights planning, she finally owned her very own store. Bella's wasn't just any shop. It sat on the corner of the fanciest shopping street in town, with big glass windows and marble floors inside. The kind of place where a single dress might cost more than what some people made in a week. Amara had worked her way up from folding clothes at department stores to managing big retail chains, but owning a place like this had been the dream that kept her going through tough times. "Would you like me to show you around one more time?" asked the real estate agent, but Amara shook her head. She'd been in the store at least 10 times during the buying process. She knew every corner, every fitting room, every light fixture. What she didn't know were the people who worked there. The old owner, Mrs. Chen, had run the place for 30 years. When she decided to retire, she'd interviewed dozens of potential buyers. To everyone's surprise, she picked Amara, saying, "This young woman understands both fashion and people. She will take good care of what I built." Amara walked around the empty store, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The morning light streamed through the windows, making the racks of expensive clothes glow. She ran her hand along a silk blouse that probably cost more than her first car. This was really happening. She thought about her mom, who had taught her to sew when she was just 8 years old. How proud she would have been to see this moment. Her mom had cleaned houses in this very neighborhood, sometimes bringing little Amara along during school breaks. One day, her mom used to say, "You'll walk through the front doors of these fancy places, not the back." The store had a staff of 12 people, and none of them knew about the sale yet. Mrs. Chen had wanted it that way. "Let me retire quietly," she had said. "You meet them fresh, see them as they truly are before they put on a show for the new boss." Amara pulled out her phone and looked at the staff photos and files Mrs. Chen had shared. There was the assistant manager with 10 years of experience, 2 senior sales associates, several junior staff, and the store manager, Richard, who had been running day-to-day operations for the past 5 years. His employee photo showed a thin-faced man with carefully combed hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Chen's notes about him were interesting. Excellent with sales numbers. Knows the inventory inside out. Customers trust his opinion on fashion. Can be difficult with certain staff members. What did certain staff members mean? Amara wondered as she locked up the store and headed home. She decided she would find out for herself. Instead of coming in on Monday with a big announcement, she would arrive dressed casually, like any other customer. She would watch, listen, and learn before revealing herself as the new owner. As she drove home, Amara couldn't stop smiling. From the little girl who once pressed her nose against these very shop windows to the woman who now owned what was behind them. It had been such a long journey. Monday couldn't come fast enough. She had no idea that her first day as owner would be nothing like she had planned. Monday morning came with a light drizzle. Amara parked her car a block away from Bella's, feeling butterflies in her stomach. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her natural curls framed her face, and she wore just a touch of lipstick. She had chosen her outfit carefully. Clean, dark jeans and a simple navy blouse. Nice enough to shop here, but nothing that screamed, "I'm the boss." "Just act normal," she told herself, grabbing a small umbrella. "You're just another customer." The store opened at 9 o'clock, and Amara walked in at 9:15. A small bell chimed as she entered. The smell of expensive perfume and leather hit her immediately. 2 customers were already inside. An older woman with perfectly styled gray hair and a younger woman trying on shoes. A sales associate was helping them, smiling and bringing out different sizes. Amara took a deep breath and began browsing through a rack of summer dresses. Each one probably cost more than her monthly car payment. She checked the price tag on a blue one and managed not to wince. From the corner of her eye, she noticed a man watching her from behind the jewelry counter. He wore a crisp white shirt with a dark tie, his hair slicked back with too much product. He whispered something to another employee, a young woman who glanced over at Amara and then quickly looked away. Amara moved to another rack, pretending not to notice. She recognized the man from his photo, Richard, the store manager. After a few minutes, he approached her, walking with quick, stiff steps. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was polite, but his eyes were cold, moving from her face down to her shoes and back up again. There was something in the way he said "you" that made the word feel dirty. "No, thank you," Amara replied with a smile. "Just looking around for now." Richard didn't return her smile. "Let me know if you need anything specific," he said, not moving away. Instead, he stood there, arms crossed, watching as she touched the fabric of a silk blouse. Amara moved to the handbag section, and Richard followed, keeping just a few steps behind her. His presence felt like a shadow that wouldn't go away. When she picked up a small leather purse, he stepped forward. "That's one of our premium items," he said sharply, as if she might somehow damage it by touching it. "It's beautiful work," Amara replied, keeping her voice light. "Italian leather?" Richard nodded stiffly but didn't engage in conversation. When Amara put the bag down and moved to another display, he was right behind her. The two customers who had been trying on shoes were now watching the scene with curious eyes. Amara spotted the assistant manager she had seen in the employee files, a woman with short dark hair arranging a window display. Their eyes met briefly, and the woman gave her an apologetic look before turning back to her task. For the next 15 minutes, wherever Amara went in the store, Richard followed. When she asked to see a pair of earrings in the display case, he hesitated before reluctantly taking them out, holding them just out of her easy reach, as if afraid she might grab them and run. The other employees seemed to notice his behavior. One young man organizing a shirt display kept glancing over with a worried expression. The woman who'd been helping the shoe customers now stood unnaturally still, pretending to fold scarves while watching the uncomfortable dance between Richard and Amara. Amara had experienced this kind of treatment before. The assuming she couldn't afford things. The following her around stores. The suspicion. Usually she would simply leave, take her money elsewhere. But not today. Today, this was her store, even if Richard didn't know it yet. She moved toward a rack of evening gowns, beautiful dresses in silks and satins. As her hand reached out to check a price tag, she could almost feel Richard's breath on her neck. The confrontation she had hoped to avoid was coming. She just didn't realize how ugly it was about to get. Amara picked up a black leather handbag from the display, turning it over to examine the craftsmanship. It was beautiful soft leather with perfect stitching and a gold clasp that caught the light. She'd always appreciated quality, even when she couldn't afford it. Now she could, but Richard didn't know that. He swooped in like a hawk, reaching for the bag. "That's a $1,200 bag," he said, his voice loud enough for the entire store to hear. "I'm not sure it's within your price range." The way he paused before saying price range made it clear he wasn't just talking about money. An older couple browsing nearby turned to look. The woman whispered something to her husband, who frowned in Richard's direction. "I'm just browsing," Amara said calmly, carefully placing the bag back on its display stand. Her heart was beating faster now, but she kept her expression neutral. Years of dealing with difficult customers had taught her to control her reactions. "You've been just browsing for nearly half an hour," Richard said, making air quotes with his fingers. "Touching everything but buying nothing." Amara straightened her shoulders. That's what browsing means, looking before deciding to buy. An young sales associate, the one who had been folding scarves, quickly busied herself with reorganizing a nearby jewelry display, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Richard crossed his arms across his chest. "Look," he said, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper, "we've had issues with shoplifting lately. People coming in, pretending to shop, and walking out with merchandise." "Are you accusing me of something?" Amara asked, keeping her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. "I'm simply stating facts," Richard replied. He glanced around the store, then leaned closer. "This is a high-end establishment. Our typical customers are, well, they usually dress differently when they come in." The assistant manager with the short dark hair had stopped arranging the window display and was now watching with a concerned expression. She took a step toward them, but stopped when Richard shot her a warning look. "I have every right to be here," Amara said, loud enough for others to hear. "And to be treated with respect while I shop." By now, the few customers in the store had stopped pretending not to notice. An elegant older woman in a cream-colored suit, actually nodded in agreement with Amara's words. Richard's face flushed red. He squared his shoulders and pointed toward the door. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. On what grounds? Amara asked, not moving. I don't need grounds. This is private property. It's a public retail space, Amara countered. You can't just ask someone to leave for no reason. Not in my store, you don't get to decide, Richard snapped, his voice rising. He pulled out his cell phone from his pocket. Either you leave now, or I'm calling the police. The entire store went silent. The assistant manager took another step forward, her face pale. Richard, I don't think. Stay out of this, Diane. He cut her off without taking his eyes off Amara. Well, are you leaving? Amara stood perfectly still, aware that every eye in the store was on her. She could walk out. It would be easier. She could come back tomorrow with the paperwork, introduce herself properly, avoid this public scene. But something deep inside her refused to move. How many others had this man intimidated? How many had walked out feeling small and ashamed just for existing in a space he thought they didn't belong in? I'm not leaving, she said quietly but firmly. I have every right to be here. Richard's lips pressed into a thin line. He looked down at his phone and began dialing. Fine, he said. Have it your way. He put the phone to his ear, still staring at Amara with cold eyes. Yes, police? I need assistance at Bella's boutique on 5th Street. We have an individual refusing to leave the premises after being asked. The assistant manager, Diane, looked horrified but still said nothing. 2 other employees exchanged worried glances. And Amara? She just stood there, calm on the outside while her mind raced. This wasn't how she planned to introduce herself as the new owner, but maybe it was exactly what needed to happen. Time seemed to slow down after Richard made the call. Customers whispered among themselves, some looking uncomfortable, others openly disapproving of Richard's behavior. One woman quietly gathered her shopping bags and left, shaking her head as she passed him. Diane, the assistant manager, approached Amara with an apologetic expression. Ma'am, I'm so sorry about this. Can I get you some water while you wait? Richard shot Diane a look that could have frozen water. She won't be here long enough for water, he snapped. Then, turning to the remaining customers, he announced in a loud voice, Sorry for the disruption, folks. The police will be here shortly to handle this situation. Amara remained standing near the handbag display, her back straight, her face calm despite the storm of emotions inside her. She had faced discrimination before, but never quite like this, never with the threat of police involvement. Part of her wanted to reveal who she was right then, to see the look on Richard's face when he realized his mistake. But another part knew that waiting would reveal more about how this store, her store now, was really run. About 10 minutes later, a police car pulled up outside. Through the large front windows, Amara could see 2 officers step out. One was a tall woman with her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. The other was a shorter man with broad shoulders and a serious expression. The bell above the door chimed as they entered. Richard practically ran to meet them, pointing dramatically at Amara. That's her, he announced loudly. She's been wandering around touching everything for almost an hour and refuses to leave when asked. He lowered his voice, but not enough to prevent Amara from hearing. We've had problems with shoplifting recently, especially with, certain types of people. The female officer's expression didn't change, but her partner frowned slightly at Richard's words. They approached Amara, who hadn't moved from her spot. Good morning, ma'am, the female officer said. Her name tag read Officer Lopez. I'm Officer Lopez, and this is Officer Chen. We received a call about a disturbance. Before Amara could respond, Richard cut in. I asked her to leave multiple times, and she refused. This is private property, and I have the right to refuse service to anyone. Officer Chen turned to Amara. Ma'am, could we hear your side of this? Amara nodded. I came in this morning to browse. I've been looking at merchandise, which is what people typically do in stores. I haven't been disruptive or rude. The manager began following me as soon as I entered, standing uncomfortably close, and eventually asked me to leave because... She paused, looking directly at Richard. It don't look like his typical customer. A few customers who had witnessed the whole thing nodded in agreement. She's lying, Richard said quickly. She was behaving suspiciously, and I have a responsibility to protect this establishment. Officer Lopez looked at the store manager with an expression that suggested she'd heard similar stories before. Sir, browsing in a store isn't suspicious behavior. She turned back to Amara. Ma'am, could we see some identification, please? Amara reached into her purse, feeling the folder with the store ownership papers pressing against her wallet. This was the moment, the reveal. She could feel her heart beating faster as she pulled out her driver's license and handed it to Officer Lopez. Here's my ID, she said calmly. Then, reaching back into her purse, she added, and you might find these documents relevant as well. She pulled out the folder and opened it, revealing the store transfer papers, signed and notarized. She handed them to Officer Lopez, who began reviewing them with Officer Chen looking over her shoulder. Richard's face showed confusion. What are those? What's going on? The store had gone completely silent. Even the soft background music seemed to have paused for this moment. Diane had stepped closer, her eyes moving from the papers to Amara's face and back again, a slow realization dawning in her expression. Officer Lopez looked up from the documents, her eyebrows raised slightly in surprise. She handed them to Richard. According to these papers, she said, this woman is Amara Johnson, the legal owner of Bella's Boutique as of last Friday. Richard stared at the papers in his hands, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. His face, which had been flushed with anger just moments before, now turned a sickly shade of white. He looked up at Amara, then back down at the papers, as if hoping the words on them might somehow change. This can't be right, he finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Officer Chen glanced at his partner, then back at Richard. The documents look legitimate to me, sir. Transfer of ownership, all properly signed and notarized. By now, everyone in the store was watching the scene unfold. 2 employees who had been pretending to work while listening had abandoned all pretense and were openly staring. Diane, the assistant manager, had stepped forward, her eyes wide with surprise. You're the new owner? She asked Amara directly. Mrs. Chen sold the store to you? Amara nodded, a small smile finally appearing on her face. Yes, as of last Friday afternoon. I'm Amara Johnson. Richard's hands were shaking as he held the papers. But why didn't anyone tell me? There should have been a memo, a meeting, something. Mrs. Chen wanted to keep the sale quiet until I could meet the staff, Amara explained, taking the documents back from Richard's trembling hands. She thought it would be good for me to see how the store operates on a normal day. A customer who had been watching the whole scene unfold let out a short laugh. Well, I bet this wasn't what she had in mind. Officer Lopez looked from Amara to Richard. So to be clear, Ms. Johnson, you are the legal owner of this establishment. I am. Amara confirmed. I have the deed and all the transfer paperwork right here. And do you want to press charges against Mr.? No. Amara cut in quickly. That won't be necessary. This has been educational. She turned to face Richard directly. Though I do think we need to have a conversation about customer service and how we treat people in this store. Richard's face had begun to regain some color, but now it drained again. Ms. Johnson, I can explain. We've had a series of thefts recently, and I was just trying to protect the store's inventory. It wasn't personal. It felt very personal, Richard, Amara replied, her voice calm but firm. And based on what I saw, you weren't treating me like a potential thief. You were treating me like I didn't belong here because of how I look. A few customers nodded in agreement. Officer Chen cleared his throat. Well, if there's no crime being reported, I think we'll be on our way. Congratulations on your new business, Ms. Johnson. Thank you, officers, Amara said. I appreciate you coming. As the police officers left, the tension in the store remained. Richard stood rooted to the spot, his tie suddenly looking too tight around his neck. Ms. Johnson, Amara, I had no idea. If I had known. If you had known I was the owner, you would have treated me differently? Amara asked. That's exactly the problem, Richard. No one should be treated the way you treated me today, owner or not. Diane stepped forward. Ms. Johnson, I'm Diane Wheeler, the assistant manager. I'm so sorry about what happened. If I had realized sooner. Amara smiled at her. It's not your fault, Diane. And please, call me Amara. The The few customers who remained in the store were watching with interest. One elderly woman actually came up and patted Amara on the arm. "Good for you, dear," she whispered before heading to the register with her purchases. Amara took a deep breath and looked around at what was now her store, the gleaming displays, the beautiful merchandise, and the staff who were all watching her with expressions ranging from shock to curiosity to, in Richard's case, barely disguised fear. "I think," she said clearly, "it's time for us all to have a talk about the future of Bella's." After the police left, Amara asked Diane to gather all the staff in the back room. The few remaining customers were politely informed that the store would be closing for a short staff meeting, and they were welcome to come back later with a special discount. They left without complaint, some of them giving Amara encouraging smiles on their way out. "Lock the front door, please," Amara said to one of the junior employees, a young man who had been watching the whole scene with wide eyes. He nodded quickly and hurried to flip the sign to closed and turn the lock. The back room was cramped with all 12 staff members squeezed in. Richard stood in the corner, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his eyes fixed on the floor. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. Amara looked around at the faces watching her. Some looked worried, others curious. Diane stood nearby, notebook in hand as if ready to take minutes of the meeting. "I'm Amara Johnson," she began, her voice steady and clear. "As you've probably all figured out by now, I bought this store from Mrs. Chen last week. This wasn't exactly how I planned to introduce myself." A nervous laugh rippled through the group. "I wanted to see the store as it really operates," Amara continued. "To experience it as a customer would. And what I experienced today was unacceptable." Richard cleared his throat. "Ms. Johnson, if I could just explain." Amara held up her hand. "I think you've done enough talking for today, Richard." She turned back to the group. "What happened to me this morning shouldn't happen to anyone. Not to a customer, not to a staff member, not to anyone who walks through those doors." She took a breath, looking each person in the eye. "I started as a sales associate 15 years ago. I've worked every holiday season, dealt with difficult customers, cleaned fitting rooms, and stayed late doing inventory counts. I know retail from the ground up. And I know that the success of any store depends on how people feel when they're in it." One of the older sales associates, a woman with silver-streaked hair, nodded in agreement. "So let me be very clear about what kind of store Bella's is going to be from now on," Amara continued. "This will be a place where everyone is treated with respect and dignity. Everyone. Regardless of what they're wearing, what they look like, or whether you think they can afford what we sell." She glanced at Richard, who was now staring at a spot on the wall, his jaw clenched. "Richard, I'd like to speak with you privately after this. The rest of you, please take a 15-minute break, and then we'll reopen. Diane, could you stay for a moment?" As the staff filed out, many of them introduced themselves to Amara, shaking her hand or offering tentative smiles. When only Diane, Richard, and Amara remained, Amara closed the door. "Richard, your behavior today was discriminatory and unacceptable. It's not how I run a business, and it's not the kind of environment I want to create here." Richard finally looked up, his face pale but defiant. "With all due respect, Ms. Johnson, you don't understand the challenges we face. The shoplifting issues are no excuse for profiling customers," Amara cut in. "If shoplifting is a problem, we'll address it with proper security measures, not by harassing people who don't fit your idea of who belongs here." She took a folder from her bag and placed it on the table. "This is a severance package, 2 weeks' pay. I'm terminating your employment effective immediately." Richard's mouth fell open. "You can't. You just got here. You don't even know how this store runs." "I know enough," Amara replied calmly. "Please clean out your desk. Diane will assist you." Richard looked from Amara to Diane, clearly hoping for some support, but the assistant manager's face remained neutral. Without another word, he snatched up the folder and stormed out of the room. When the door closed behind him, Diane let out a long breath. "I should have said something earlier, when he was following you around. I knew it wasn't right, but he was your boss," Amara finished for her. "I understand. Now tell me, how would you feel about a promotion to store manager?" The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of changes. Amara arrived early every morning and stayed late, learning every aspect of her new business. She memorized inventory numbers, studied sales patterns, and spent time with each employee to understand their strengths and concerns. Diane took to her new role as store manager like she had been born for it. Freed from Richard's shadow, she blossomed, bringing fresh ideas and a genuine warmth to her leadership. Together, she and Amara formed a partnership that quickly began to transform Bella's from the inside out. On a rainy Tuesday morning, about 3 weeks after the incident, as the staff now called it, Amara gathered everyone for a meeting before the store opened. "I've been watching and learning," she began, perched on the edge of a display table. "And I think it's time to make some real changes around here." She unrolled a large sheet of paper covered with colorful notes and drawings. "First, we're going to rearrange the floor plan. The current layout keeps our most expensive items front and center, which is intimidating for many customers. We'll create a more welcoming flow with accessible items near the entrance and our premium merchandise integrated throughout." The staff nodded, some jotting down notes. "Second, we're expanding our inventory." This announcement caused a few surprised looks. Mrs. Chen kept this place very exclusive, but I think we can maintain our high-end appeal while adding more accessible price points. Not everyone can afford a $1,200 handbag, but they might save up for a $200 one that's still beautiful and well-made. A younger employee raised her hand. "Won't that change our image, though? The exclusivity is part of what makes Bella special." Amara smiled. "What makes us special should be exceptional products and exceptional service, not making people feel like they don't belong here. We can be both welcoming and high-end." Next came the biggest announcement. "We're also starting a new training program. Everyone, and I mean everyone, including me, will go through workshops on customer service, inclusivity, and recognizing unconscious bias." There were a few uncomfortable shifts among the older staff members, but no one objected. And finally, Amara said, her eyes bright with excitement, "We're launching a community outreach program called Style for All. Once a month, we'll host free workshops for local teens to learn about fashion, professional dress, and confidence. I've already reached out to the community center and 3 local high schools." The energy in the room had shifted from cautious to genuinely excited. Even the most skeptical employees were leaning forward, caught up in Amara's vision. "Any questions?" she asked. Hands shot up across the room. The changes didn't happen overnight, but over the next 6 months, Bella's underwent a remarkable transformation. The new floor plan made the store feel more spacious and inviting. The expanded inventory brought in customers who had previously walked past, thinking they couldn't afford anything inside. The training programs changed how staff interacted not just with customers but with each other. Most surprisingly, sales didn't drop, they soared. By the 6-month mark, Bella's revenue had increased by 30% compared to the previous year. One Thursday afternoon, as Amara was helping a young woman find the perfect interview outfit, the bell above the door chimed. She looked up to see a familiar face, the elderly woman who had patted her arm on that first day and whispered, "Good for you." "Mrs. Reynolds." Amara greeted her with a warm smile. "How lovely to see you again." The woman looked around the store with approval. "This place has a different feel to it now, brighter somehow." "Thank you," Amara said. "We've made some changes." "I heard that manager, what was his name, isn't here anymore." "Richard." "No, he's not." Mrs. Reynolds nodded sagely. "I never liked the way he hovered around certain customers, made shopping uncomfortable." She leaned in closer. "My friends and I, we've been telling everyone to come here now. Word gets around, you know." That evening, after closing, Amara sat alone in her office going over the day's sales figures. Her phone buzzed with a message from Diane. "You're not going to believe this. We've been nominated for Best Retail Experience in the City Business Awards." Amara smiled to herself. Just a year ago, she had been a retail manager with a dream. Now she owned one of the most talked-about boutiques in the city, not just for its merchandise, but for its atmosphere of genuine welcome. The next morning, she was invited to speak at a business conference about her success. Standing at the podium, looking out at a room full of retail owners and managers, she began with the story of her first day at Bella's. "I could have revealed who I was right away," she told the audience. "I could have fired the manager and moved on. But that day taught me something important. Sometimes you have to experience the problem to truly understand the solution. She paused, looking around the room. What happened to me happens to people every day in stores across this country. The difference is most of them don't own the store. The audience laughed, but it was a thoughtful kind of laughter. Treating people with dignity isn't just the right thing to do morally, it's good business. At Bella's, we don't just sell clothes and accessories. We sell an experience where everyone feels valued. And it turns out, when people feel valued, they keep coming back. As Amara finished a speech to enthusiastic applause, she thought about how sometimes the worst beginnings can lead to the best outcomes, if you're brave enough to stand your ground and then build something better.